you just said this is some Lucifer's problem, right?
No, I didn't say it's Lucifer's problem.
But humans aren't even here. There's no free will. There's no moral agent. These animals don't know
Lucifer
right from
had a
wrong.
free will.
When there's a zebra, 1,000,000 years ago, before any humans show up, there's a zebra somewhere on the African plain
Yes.
with his pipe caught in the jaws of a lion.
Yes.
Right? He's asphyxiating to death over hours.
Yes.
Dying an agonizing death.
Yes.
There's no humans. There's no free will. There's no moral way to rationalize
Right.
it. There's no agent slapping someone across the face. Right?
Right.
None of this is true. Right?
Right.
There's not even a human yet.
Yep.
How does an all-loving God permit unnecessary suffering?
This guy is completely outraged at the idea of animals suffering for millions of years. So he believes that when we look at history and we look at reality, right, especially the problem of animal suffering, he believes reality is the way we would expect it to be if atheism is true. But is that the case? Is atheism the real explanation for our world, or is Christianity? Let's let Cliff talk here and see what his response is, and I would respond at the end and share my own personal insights. Let's get to it.
I was raised in a Jain family.
Yes.
It's a religion that's pretty well attested to for at least a few thousand years. The central claim of the Jain religion is
Yep.
that animals we should do everything in our power to minimize the suffering of animals.
Yes.
Right? And then I open up the Bible and read through the Old Testament, and what I find is God in Samuel orders Saul to destroy the Amalekites, the women and the men and the women,
Yes,
the
sir.
children and the infants, the cattle and the donkey. Now I can give you that maybe the men and women were corrupt. I find it harder to buy the infants, but sure, maybe the infants need to be killed as well. But the cattle and the donkey?
Okay.
And when Saul leaves alive some of the animals,
Yes.
what does God say? I regret that I have made Saul king.
That's correct. Very accurate you are.
Why? Okay, in the flood, when God kills the animals, it says
Yes.
they died over 40 days and 40 nights. So an agonizing, torturous death. And if all of this you want to say is because this is not the world as God made it, God made a perfect world, but we rejected God, and so evil and suffering entered the world. This is not how God intended.
Right.
But this is the consequence of our actions. Well, how do you then explain the billions of years of suffering of animals before any human even showed up? You have animals suffering, dying, predation, just unimaginable amounts of suffering
Yep.
for hundreds of millions, if not billions of years, before the first human,
Yes.
before any human ever showed up.
Yep.
So it seems that God is not only perfectly comfortable with suffering before this fall of animals at a mass scale, but even more so is comfortable with the torture and death of all of these animals under his own command. He orders the divine armies to slaughter
Does
the
God
Achilles
have the
of
right to
horses.
judge? Does God have the right to judge?
Judge someone who's not a moral agent?
Does God have the right to judge?
Judge
Answer
who?
the question.
Judge humans, sure.
All right. So if God has the right to judge, and the Bible records that God has judged at different times, we're not holding that against God. Because God is just, he judges justly and fairly, but he does judge.
Well, where was the justice in killing the cattle and the donkeys? What did they do?
They didn't do anything wrong.
So then why were
They're-
they killed?
Look, it's really naive if you think that this fine university was put together last summer. Obviously, this fine university was put together over a long period of years where people sacrificed, and you're the beneficiary, aren't you? So this whole idea that, oh, it's all one-on-one, one-on-one, one-on-one is baloney. You didn't do anything to put this fine university together. You benefit from it because other people sacrificed. Similarly, if other people make wrong decisions, there are going to be consequences that travel down through the years, and you're going to get hurt by them. And you have been hurt by them, and so have I, so have all of us.
Tell me who made the mistake here.
God creates us with a free will. We choose to rebel against God. God takes a step back, and chaos fills the gap. You're not born into a fair world. You're not born into a just world. You're born into a grotesquely unfair, unjust world, not because God created it that way, but because your forefathers and foremothers chose to rebel against God, as did mine. God takes a step back because he respects our free will, and chaos erupts. So you're born, and animals are born, into a grotesquely unfair world.
You made the justification of the fall, right? I still don't understand how that leaves any room for the cattle and the donkeys to be needless. Like, but let's just say this is because of the fall. It's chaos, right?
Why are
about before
animals
the fall?
valuable? Why are animals valuable?
I'm not making a claim. I'm not saying. that
Oh,
animals
yes, you
valuable.
are. You're saying it's evil that the Bible talks about God judging animals. That was your whole point. Now, answer my question. Why are animals valuable?
My claim here is I'm not making an actual claim. What I'm saying is like Lincoln said, if this is not wrong, then nothing is wrong. You claim that this is a loving God. All I see is him ordering the torture and killing of animals, and even before humans showed up in his perfect world, before the fall, just billions of years of unmitigated suffering. So I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with any of this. I'm agnostic to this question, but you're the one claiming that this is supervised by a loving God. The burden is on you, sir, not me.
No, sir. You've got to come up with the most plausible, the most reasonable answer to these difficult questions. And my first point to you, sir, is if there is no God, animal life is insignificant, human life is insignificant, because it's all a cosmic accident. And your whole moral outrage over pain in animals is totally absurd, totally meaningless if there is no God. You're cutting the ground out from beneath your moral indignation.
I'll give you that. It's a good rhetorical trick when I say, what about...
No, it's not a rhetorical trick. It's called logic.
Answer my
It's
question.
called reason. I am answering
What
you.
happened before the fall?
I'm trying to chill you out with your moral outrage over something that you have no right to be morally outraged about.
What?
And that's
Why
not a
is this
trick,
different
sir.
from the fall? I'm
It's
not
trying to be
saying-
intellectually consistent.
Under my philosophy, there could be a loving God, there could be an evil God,
Oh,
there
don't give me this
anything.
could be. What do you believe?
I don't know.
Well, then why are you so outraged over animals getting suffered?
Because I think it contradicts your claim of an all-loving
Oh,
God.
you don't give a rip about my claim. You stick with your worldview. What in your worldview tells you that the pain of animals is wrong? Why is it wrong that an animal suffered?
You keep asking me the questions. I've said, I'm willing to admit, I don't know the nature of the divine. I don't know what the nature of God is. You're the one saying, I know what the nature of God is. He is all-loving. So then you tell me, if you're making the claim there is an all-loving God supervising this, why is there animal suffering, profound amounts of it, before the fall?
The history of humankind is how we have wreaked havoc.
Before humans, underlined, before any humans
Have you ever heard of the fall of Lucifer?
So it's Lucifer's fault?
No, it's not Lucifer's fault. That's not what I said. But there was chaos before the fall of Adam and Eve. You alluded to, well, what about before Adam and Eve? And I'm telling you, there was problems before Adam and Eve, obviously. Why are you so outraged that animals suffer? Why?
I'm not. I'm not
You
even
told
a
me you did.
cognitivist. I don't think you can even make any of these claims.
No, sir, you're running an intellectual gymnastic ring, sir. Okay, I take you seriously. I respect what you say. But you better have the intellectual integrity to answer my question. Why are you so outraged over the suffering of animals?
If I say I don't know what the nature of God is, okay, I'll even make an open contention to you. Let's say if I read through the history of this planet, it seems more likely to me that God is evil than he is good, or that he has some kind of mixed nature like any of us. I can't get from billions of years of suffering to an all-loving God for animals, not for humans, mind you. I can see all kinds of justifications for that. But before any human shows up,
Yeah.
billions of years of animals dying, I don't see all-loving God equals this. I can see any other form of God, he's evil and good, he's moody, who knows what God's nature is, right? I can see all this being consistent with him. I can see it being consistent with a deistic framework. God created the universe and he's just set it in motion and he's not supervising it. You're making all these active claims about the nature of God.
No, you've assumed a lot about what I believe and put words into my mouth I never said.
Is God all-loving?
Thank you for asking. Yes, God is all-loving, but that does not mean he does not limit his power by giving me a free will, which means if I go up to her, slap her in the face, and say, God made me do it, I'm a con artist and a liar. When I slap her in the face, that is evil because I am denigrating the purpose for which God gave me this hand. I'm denigrating her as a human being created in the image of God. That is why that's evil. But if there is no God and I slap her in the face, it's all relative, baby. And if I want to respect you and love you, great. And if I want to slap you in the face, that's my choice. And who are you to tell me that my choice is wrong? It's my choice. And hopefully you're not going to be so culturally elitist that you're going to tell me from your cultural perspective that for me to smack you in the face is wrong. Baloney. But if there is a God who created this woman with intrinsic innate value and created me for a purpose to love and respect her, then it is wrong. And the record of the Bible and the record of history is how we human beings have perverted the good gifts that God has given us, and chaos has erupted.
You just said this is some Lucifer's problem, right?
No, I didn't say it's Lucifer's problem.
But humans aren't even here. There's no free will. There's no moral agent. These animals don't know
Lucifer
right
had
from
a
wrong.
free will.
When there's a zebra A million years ago, before any humans show up, there's a zebra somewhere on the African plain
Yes.
with his pipe caught in the jaws of a lion.
Yes.
Right? He's asphyxiating to death over hours.
Yes.
Dying an agonizing death.
Yes.
There's no humans. There's no free will. There's no moral way to rationalize
Right.
it. There's no agent slapping someone across the face. Right?
Right.
None of this is true. Right?
Right.
There's not even a human yet.
Yep.
How does an all-loving God permit unnecessary suffering?
Because when Satan rebelled, evil entered the experience of
And where did
This
Satan
universe.
come from then?
God
made
created
Satan?
Satan.
So God created Satan,
Yes.
knowing that Satan would rebel,
Yep.
and that's why we have animal suffering.
God
You
created.
haven't pushed the problem back.
God created a guy named Adolf Hitler, knowing full well what Hitler would do. I don't know why God allowed that to happen, but I do know that God has chosen to partially limit his power by giving us a free will.
Even us.
Us and Lucifer. And I find it fascinating you brought up your zebra friend. When that zebra has a lion on his throat, the other zebras pull their heads up, look at their fellow zebra being slaughtered by that lion, and then they put their heads back down and continue to eat. There is a qualitative difference between you, a human being, with a mind, a conscience, and a will, versus an animal. So it all gets back to you, my first question to you, which you have not answered, which is, and I find it very interesting you've not answered me, why are animals valuable from your perspective, from your worldview? Why?
Apparently, I don't know is a fine answer when Cliff says it, but not when I say it.
You
right?
can say whenever you want to say it, I don't know.
I've said it over and over again. I am not claiming that there's an all-loving God. I don't know the nature of the divine, right? I'm not making any active claims here. I don't know why God permits this. I don't think he is all-loving.
Sir, you
Right.
made an active claim when you first stepped out of the crowd and expressed moral outrage over pain animals experience. And I'm pinning you to the wall, and you don't appreciate it, and I understand why. You don't appreciate because you said it, not me. You expressed outrage over animal suffering. Fine. Now I'm asking you, why is animal suffering so outrageous? You're the one who said it, not me.
Exactly. Okay. Let's.
Why?
Right.
Don't answer it, right?
If this
Then,
is
sir,
not
I'm going to
wrong-
have to go on to somebody else. If you refuse to really engage, I'm going to have to go on to somebody else.
You can call it whatever you want, right? You can call it a moral.
No, not you can. What do you think? You experience moral outrage over animal suffering. Fine, I respect that. But when I ask you, why is it so outrageous that animals suffer, you're choking on your tongue, sir. You're not answering me.
I'm not joking on anything. When I
Yes,
see
you are.
an animal suffer, I have a moral conscience. What Socrates might have called his inner daemon, right?
Okay?
And when I see an animal cry out in pain and scream and bleed to death, I know how that would feel, right? If a lion had its jaws on my neck, I know
Okay.
how that would feel, right? I have the sense of what pain feels like. It's not a pleasant sensation, right? So if I see this deeply painful experience rooted in suffering,
Okay.
and I see that magnified out billions of times over billions of years, it does not lend to me that this is the result of an all-loving creator. This doesn't feel like love. If a lion had his jaws
Well,
on
if
my
there
neck,
is
and he
no
was standing
creator,
over here-
what's wrong with the lion ripping the
There
throat
may
out of
be
a zebra?
creator. He's not all-loving. How do you get from creator to the creator is all-loving?
It's real simple. If there is no loving creator, if there's just a power, a higher force, then morality is relative.
Sure, and morality is relative. So what?
Well, then why are you getting so upset about animal suffering? What's eating at your cross so badly? I'll tell you why. Because you got a conscience, and your conscience convicts you that certain things are right and other things are wrong. Your worldview problem, though, is you don't have a God, an intelligent mind prior to the human mind, who defines what's right and what's wrong. Therefore, you're up a creek without a paddle when it comes to answering my question. Why is it so wrong? Well, just because I see the pain. Well, what's wrong with pain? Is that just your arbitrary relative perspective that pain is bad? Or is there something really fundamental here when it comes to the value of an animal's life, the value of a human life?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it a lot. Thank you so very, very much.
All right, I completely understand where this student is coming from. He's saying the problem of animal suffering is a problem to the Christian worldview because it is the Christian worldview that makes the claim that there exists an all-loving, all-powerful, all-knowing God. And if an all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-loving God exists, then why do we have the problem of animal suffering for millions of years? Now, this objection has a lot of problems. One, to begin with, the atheist first has to prove, because he's basing his argument on a lot of assumptions here. The first assumption is that animals are self-aware, they are conscious, they are aware of suffering. But this is something only rational agents have. He can't even make an argument for consciousness because it cannot explain it, and it does not exist in a purely materialistic worldview, in an atheist worldview. Number two is that pain serves as an important mechanism for the survival in the animal kingdom, because if animals don't feel pain, then they would not flee or, see something that this is bad, I must avoid being caught by a lion, right? Number three, the atheist made a point about suffering, God allowing unnecessary suffering. Now, saying unnecessary suffering, how does he know it's unnecessary? Because he is not an all-knowing being. It's like looking out into my yard and saying, because I don't see a slug, therefore there isn't one. And it's the same way. We do not have the mental capacity to make such judgments and say this is unnecessary suffering, because we're finite, so we can't make such a claim. Moreover, the assumption that also animals have been suffering for millions and billions of years, that's also an assumption, because he's basing this claim that we have fossil records, and when we look at these fossil records, we see that animals dying from disease, predation, and etc. But these fossil records, the dating mechanisms we have, are not 100% bulletproof. There have been mistakes. Like, for example, there's been scientific discoveries of multiple dinosaur bones that have collagen and blood tissues in them, which are not supposed to be there had they been, dated, what was it, 64 to 65 million years old? That shouldn't be the case. And there's multiple examples like that. But the reason is because the scientists, they look at this scientific data through a purely materialistic, naturalistic worldview, ignoring the existence of God, ignoring, catastrophic events like the flood of Noah. So I'm not saying it is the case that I'm not arguing for a young earth here, but I'm just saying that he needs to focus on what he's building his case. Atheists are building their case for animal suffering on a lot of assumptions, scientific assumptions, and the assumption for awareness. Lastly, even if we do grant the view, let's say they've been suffering for millions of years, they're self-aware, animals have been suffering from predation or disease for millions of years. Even if we do grant that, Christianity gives an answer. The claim is not God is all loving, therefore suffering doesn't exist. No, it's God is all loving and he's doing something about suffering, and it tells us why. There's the fall of man, and Cliff brought up an important point, which is the fall of Satan. It is, and I don't know why the student was so shocked. Also, you're blaming this on Lucifer? It's not blaming it on Lucifer. It's simply saying that a rebellion has consequences. I mean, in our world, any rebellion that takes place in any country, you see it has consequences. People die. Economically, the country suffers. Like if you look at Syria at the moment, it has consequences. And similarly, are you trying to say that the rebellion of 1/3 of the angels has absolutely no consequences for our cosmos? So it's not an unreasonable answer. And the Christians are not making this response from their own thoughts, because the Bible tells us. It tells us that 1/3 of the angels rebelled. It tells us that in the garden, who tempted Adam and Eve? Satan. So Satan was a fallen being. He had fallen prior to the fall of man in the garden. But we could conclude this, that the Christian God is a loving God. He did not just watch us suffer. He suffered with us through the person of Jesus Christ, and he suffered for us, and not just for the sinful nature of human beings, but for redeeming the entire creation. Romans 8 tells us that the entire creation, is groaning. So God wants to redeem this world, and there is a day where the creation will be renewed and will be redeemed. So God, he cares about his creation, and he has hope and purpose. But for the atheist, what he has to bite on is that if God doesn't exist, then his moral outrage for animal suffering is completely baseless. Okay, so what do you think? Does animal suffering disprove the existence of God? Drop your comments below. Tell me what you think. And as always, keep seeking truth and standing firm in the one who's truth himself. God bless you.